Everyone loves to listen to a good book, and there are so many wonderful ones to choose, so we decided to bring you this podcast of Stories Come to Life. Each episode features a story from either classic or modern literature, especially chosen to be interesting and exciting to hear. So sit back, relax, and listen to this story come to life. Welcome to Stories Come to Life. I am your host, Kathryn Lopez Luker. So many people have enjoyed listening to Nancy Drew's adventures that I decided to record the fourth book in the series, The Mystery at Lilac Inn, which, like the other three I already recorded, was also published first in 1930. Please enjoy Nancy's story as she anticipates a glimpse of the famous Crandall jewels. Looking forward to this thrilling opportunity helps her endure the stress of interviewing many candidates for the position of housekeeper for the Drew household, while faithful Hannah Gruen has gone to help her ailing sister. Now sit back, relax, and listen to this story come to life. Nancy Drew and the Mystery at Lilac Inn. Chapter 1. A Chance Meeting. A bright blue roadster, low-swung and smart, rolled swiftly along the winding lake road to halt suddenly before a large signboard, which boldly proclaimed to all who chanced that way, "Lilac Inn. Chicken dinners are specialty." The driver, a pretty girl of perhaps 16, attractive in a frock which either by accident or design exactly matched the blue of the automobile, smiled whimsically as she read the words. "My specialty, too," Nancy Drew told herself. "The thought of chicken almost makes me expire from hunger. I think I'll stop here for luncheon." Guiding the car into the side road, she drove beneath a long canopy of trees and presently came within sight of Lilac Inn. As she swung the roadster into line with the row of automobiles parked in the yard, it seemed to her that the old inn had never appeared more picturesque than on this particular spring day. Huge lilac bushes, heavy with bloom, completely surrounded the rambling structure, while a well-kept lawn sloped gently to a crystal lake at the rear. Alighting from the roadster, Nancy stood for a moment, gazing toward the lake. So absorbed was she in the beauty of the scene that she failed to notice the approach of a girl who from appearance might have been her own age. "Nancy Drew, of all people!" the stranger cried eagerly as she rushed up. Startled at hearing her name called, Nancy Drew wheeled quickly and then smiled as she recognized a former classmate whom she had not seen for many weeks. It was not difficult to smile upon Emily Crandall, for her candid blue eyes, delicate coloring, and almost classical features gave her a beauty which was the envy of her friends. Though she lacked Nancy Drew's poise and keen mind, she did possess an unusually sunny disposition and had a way of accepting life as she found it. Since the death of her mother many years before, she had been under the guardianship of Mrs. Jane Willoughby, a young widow. Unfortunately, Emily Crandall never had a great deal of money, but the lack of it did not appear to trouble her. "Emily Crandall!" Nancy exclaimed in genuine delight, gripping her friend's hand. "What brought you here?" "Oh, I was driving to River Heights to see a friend. Mrs. Willoughby lent me her sedan for the day, but, as luck would have it, the mean thing stalled. I walked here thinking I might find someone to help me." "Perhaps you're only out of gasoline." "I'm afraid not. But why worry about such a trifle as a stalled car? After all, it was fortunate that I was forced to stop here. Otherwise, I should have missed you." "What are you doing here anyway? Looking for another mystery?" "I should say not," Nancy Drew returned emphatically. "I think I've had enough of mystery to last me a lifetime. Anyway, if I were looking for one, I wouldn't choose such a lovely spot as Lilac Inn. Mysteries sometimes pop up in strange places, Nancy. and I must say you have a faculty for running into them. Everyone said it was a wonderful piece of detective work when you solved the mystery of the Jacob Aborn bungalow. I read glowing accounts of your cleverness in the newspapers. Just imagine capturing a criminal. I'd be thrilled to death. I was happy to help Laura Pendleton regain her inheritance, Nancy said quietly, but I'm afraid the reporters exaggerated my part a little. Then, to change the subject, have you had luncheon? No, I haven't, and it's after 1 o'clock, too. I'm nearly starved. Then why not lunch with me? After that, we can see what can be done about your car. Suits me, Emily agreed willingly. Arm in arm, the two girls hurried up the path to the inn. Entering, they saw that the dining room was crowded, but the head waiter bowed to Nancy in recognition, and to the astonishment of persons who had not received choice tables, they were promptly escorted to a secluded nook, which permitted an excellent view of the lake and the grounds. "How do you do it?" Emily asked in a low tone when the girls were seated. "The waiter gave us the very nicest table in the room." "Oh, I've been here before. That probably explains it." "You know it doesn't, Nancy Drew, but you're too modest to admit that you're something of a personage. At the rate you're going, you'll soon be as famous as your father." "Oh, Emily," Nancy protested, "what possesses you anyway? Just because I've solved a few old mysteries." Her voice trailed off as she studied the menu card. "I can't make up my mind what to order." "You're positively the limit," Emily sighed, as she too turned her attention to the bill of fare. "Food interests you more than an honest compliment." "Right now, I'm afraid I must admit it does," Nancy laughed. "You see, I've driven nearly 70 miles since breakfast. Dad sent me over to Windlow with some legal papers for Judge Howell. I started back without luncheon." "I'm glad you did, Nancy. Otherwise we'd not have met here." Nancy Drew finished writing out her order, and after handing it to the waiter, settled back in her chair. "Tell me what you've been doing with yourself this summer, Emily. I haven't seen you for ages." "Oh, can't you guess by looking at my freckles? I've been living at a cottage on the lake." "Alone?" "Oh, no, with Mrs. Willoughby. She's a dear, Nancy, but she's not to be my guardian much longer." "Why, how is that?" Nancy inquired in surprise. "Well, in less than a week I'll be of age. I'll be 18 next Friday, and it's going to be the most exciting birthday I ever had." "You mean because you'll be free from your guardian?" "Oh, no, I've always liked Mrs. Willoughby. I'm thrilled because I'm going to come into my inheritance." "Your inheritance? Why, I didn't know." "Neither did I until last week," Emily broke in. "There was very little left of my mother's estate, but it seems that by my grandmother's will, I am going to come into the Crandall family jewels." "Oh, Emily, how wonderful! I've always heard of the famous Crandall jewels." "They're beauties, Nancy, mostly diamonds, too, valued at not a cent less than $40,000. "I'd love to see them." "Well, you shall. Mrs. Willoughby is to turn them over to me on Friday." "Doesn't it worry you, Emily? I wouldn't know how to take care of such an inheritance." "Well, it does worry me a little," Emily admitted slowly. "But of course, I'll rent a safety deposit box at the bank." "I wouldn't delay if I were you." "I guess I won't," Emily decided after a moment of thought. "I've been in a state of respectable poverty too long to risk losing my fortune now that I've come into it. However, I won't dispose of the jewels until after you've seen them, Nancy. Can't you motor out to our cottage next Friday?" "Of course I'll come," Nancy returned eagerly. "I wouldn't miss an opportunity to see the Crandall jewels." By this time, the waiter had appeared, bearing a tray of food, and the girls turned their attention to the good things which were placed before them. You haven't told me a thing about yourself, Emily presently said to her friend. I guess I've been monopolizing the conversation. Oh, there's nothing special to tell. Last summer I had a thrilling time of it at Melrose Lake. But this year I'm afraid I'll be stuck in River Heights all summer, unless I can find a new housekeeper to take Hannah Gruen's place. Your housekeeper is leaving? Yes. Her sister is ill, and she's expecting to be called away any day now to take care of her. I dread looking for another to take her place. You don't know where I can find a good housekeeper, do you? Indeed I don't. I'm afraid you'll have quite a time in finding anyone. I don't doubt it, Nancy sighed. But at least I'll have several days before Hannah leaves. That will give me a chance to break in a new girl. The two finished their luncheon, and although Emily protested, Nancy insisted on paying the check. They left the dining room, pausing outside the door. If you'll excuse me for a minute, I must make a telephone call, Nancy said. I must let Dad know that I'll be late in reaching River Heights, or he'll be worried. Hurrying away, she sought a telephone booth and quickly put in a call to River Heights. After a brief wait, she heard her father's voice at the other end of the wire. "Hello, Nancy," Carson Drew began before she could say a word. "Jove, I'm glad you called just now. I've been trying to reach you for the last 2 hours." "Why? What has happened?" Nancy demanded in alarm. "I just received a telegram from Judge Graham. You know, he's one of the biggest men in the state. He'll be spending the coming weekend with us." "Oh," Nancy gasped, but instantly arose to the occasion. "Well, I guess we can manage it all right. I'll come home just as quickly as I can." "I haven't told you the worst, Nancy. Hannah just learned that her sister has suffered a relapse. She's planning to leave on the 3:20 train." "Leaving today?" "Yes, with Judge Graham coming. You must get busy at once." "I'll rush right home, Dad, and see what can be done. But I'm dreadfully afraid it will be impossible to find anyone to take her place on such short notice." "Do the best you can, Nancy. I'm depending upon you." With that, Carson Drew said goodbye and hung up the receiver. Nancy Drew stood for a moment, staring blankly at the telephone. She knew that her father, being a man, had no comprehension of the mammoth task which lay before her. In some way, she must find a satisfactory housekeeper before Judge Graham's arrival. But how that was to be accomplished, she did not know. Chapter 2. Rising to an Occasion. Leaving the telephone booth, Nancy Drew hurried back to where she had left Emily Crandall and quickly explained that she must start at once for River Heights. "Can't I drop you off at the nearest garage?" she offered. "You can find a mechanic and go back after your car." "Won't it be out of your way?" "Not at all. There's a garage about 3 miles from here." "Then I'll certainly accept your offer, because I don't want to camp on the road all day." Nancy led the way to the roadster. Skillfully turning in the narrow parking space, she drove down the lane to the main road, and soon left Lilac Inn far behind. Presently sighting a roadside garage, she stopped the car and Emily alighted. "Don't forget you're to see the Crandall jewels next Friday," she reminded Nancy as she said goodbye. "Oh, I won't forget." As Emily stepped back, Nancy shifted gears. The roadster moved slowly away and then gathered speed. Nancy Drew drove rapidly, for she was eager to reach home, knowing that much work was awaiting her. She glanced at her watch and saw that it was after 2:00. She must hurry if she was to get there before Hannah left. It was exactly 2:30 when she reached the outskirts of River Heights. Following the boulevard, she came within sight of her own home, and was relieved to see her father's automobile standing at the door. That meant that he had not yet taken Hannah to the railroad station. Swinging into the driveway, Nancy Drew halted the roadster and sprang out. But before she could reach the house, her father, suitcase in hand, came out the front door, followed by Hannah Gruen. The housekeeper was the first to catch sight of Nancy. "Oh, Miss Nancy," she began apologetically, "I'm dreadfully sorry to leave you in a mess like this. But my poor sister—" "Of course you must go," Nancy told her quickly. "Don't worry about me. I'll get along somehow." "Oh, you're so kind, Miss Nancy. I'll come back just the first minute I can, but it may be several months." "Stay as long as your sister needs you." "We must hurry if you're to catch your train, Hannah," Carson Drew interrupted. "It's a long way to the station." He rushed the housekeeper to the waiting automobile and started the motor. "Better get in touch with an employment agency right away," he called back to Nancy as the car moved away. Nancy watched the automobile until it was out of sight, and then walked slowly toward the house. She knew that Hannah had indeed left her in a mess. Since the death of her mother many years before, Nancy Drew had managed the household. On the whole, she had engineered everything so skillfully that her father little dreamed of the heavy responsibility which rested upon her shoulders. As a famous criminal and mystery case lawyer, Carson Drew found it necessary to maintain a certain social position, and accordingly, Nancy was frequently called upon to entertain noted professional men. She had often been present when Carson Drew discussed important cases with detectives and police officials, and as a result had become interested in detective work herself. Her first fame came when she uncovered the secret of the old clock. Later, she solved the mystery of a troubled household, discovering a hidden staircase and having no end of creepy adventures in an underground passageway. Undaunted by this experience, she risked her life to help Laura Pendleton. Nancy's unusual adventures in this connection are recounted in the third volume of the series, The Bungalow Mystery. Now, as Nancy Drew walked slowly toward the house, she was considering the problem which Hannah Gruen's departure had created. Her father confidently expected that by the time Judge Graham arrived for his weekend visit, the household would be moving as smoothly as before. But Nancy, who had tried many housekeepers before she had secured Hannah, was beset with doubt. "I'll telephone the agency right away and see what they can do for me," she decided. Having looked up a number in the directory, she repeated it to an operator, and after a brief wait, was connected with the manager of the best employment agency in River Heights. She stated her wants briefly, trying not to appear too exacting. "We'll do the best we can for you, miss," came the not too comforting response. "But right now we have only one person on hand, an older woman who's new to the agency. So we don't know what her work ethic is like yet." "Oh, send her out this afternoon," Nancy ordered in despair. "I must have someone immediately." Replacing the telephone on the stand, she went to the kitchen to take stock of affairs there. As she had feared, everything was in confusion. In her haste, Hannah had not even ordered the groceries for the following day. Nancy set about putting things in order. While she was making out the grocery list, she heard her father's car on the drive. "Well, did you find someone?" he questioned a few minutes later when he entered the living room. "Yes, the agency is sending out a new woman this afternoon." Nancy, observing that her father looked tired, refrained from adding that she feared the worst. "I'm mighty glad you found someone," Carson Drew responded in relief. "You're a wonderful little manager. By the way, I suppose you delivered those papers to Judge Howell all right?" "Yes, I found him at the courthouse and had no trouble. On the way back, I stopped at Lilac Inn for luncheon and ran into Emily Crandall. She is celebrating her 18th birthday this week. According to her grandmother's will, she's to inherit the famous Crandall diamonds." Carson Drew whistled softly. "Whew! Quite a windfall, I must say. I remember the Crandall jewels very well. They were very quaint and beautiful. I'm so glad they were willed to Emily. She's never had many pretty things, especially since the death of her mother. I hope she'll manage to hang on to them after they fall into her hands, Mr. Drew commented. Oh, I'm sure Emily won't let them slip through her fingers. She's not in the least extravagant. I wasn't thinking of that. It merely occurred to me that unscrupulous persons may be interested in those jewels. Nancy nodded thoughtfully. I believe she intends to place them in a bank vault immediately. A very wise precaution. Carson Drew lowered his voice as he heard a heavy step on the porch. Nancy sprang up from the davenport, where she was sitting, and rushed to the door. It must be the new housekeeper, she cried hopefully. As she opened the door, her heart sank within her. It was indeed the woman sent by the employment agency, but a more unlikely housekeeper Nancy had never seen. She was dirty and slovenly in appearance, and had an unpleasant way of shuffling her feet when she walked. Inviting her into the house, Nancy asked a few questions, which the woman answered in an unsatisfactory manner. She was unable to produce references of any description. I'm very sorry, but I'm afraid you won't do, Nancy told her at last. It was with a feeling of mingled disappointment and relief that she watched the woman depart. As a housekeeper, that woman was impossible, and yet she wondered if she had been unwise to let her go. She must find someone. Rushing to the telephone, she called a number and was quickly connected with another employment agency. After a long discussion with the manager, she finally secured a promise that a woman would be sent out early the next morning. I certainly hope she'll be better than that first woman, Nancy sighed to her father. I don't know why, but I have a feeling this housekeeper problem will prove my undoing. Chapter 3. A Queer Girl. Oh, Dad, you don't know what a time I've had. Nancy Drew emitted a tired sigh as she emerged from the kitchen, unfastening her apron. This morning, the agency sent me an Irishwoman, but she was even worse than the one that came yesterday. She was the most unreasonable housekeeper I ever interviewed. Poor little girl, Mr. Drew sympathized. I can't let you do the work yourself. Well, I think it will be easier on me than trying to break in a new girl. After the Irishwoman left, I called another agency, and they sent me a Scotch lassie. She looked promising, but I found she hasn't a particle of experience and knew little about cooking. I'm completely discouraged. I don't wonder, and with Judge Graham coming Saturday night. I'll find someone before that time, if I have to coax her away from my best friend, Nancy declared resolutely. There's one more agency that I haven't tried. As soon as her father had finished luncheon and had left for his office, Nancy Drew again went to the telephone and was gratified when the employment agency promised to send out a girl at once. She was washing dishes when she heard a sharp knock on the front door. Drying her hands, she rushed into the hall to answer the summons. As she swung open the massive oak door, she beheld a tall, wiry, dark-complexioned girl, who obviously was the one sent out from the agency. She had dark, piercing eyes, and stared at Nancy almost impudently. Nancy resisted an impulse to shut the door in her face. She did not like the girl's sly look. On the other hand, she thought that it might not be fair to judge by appearances alone. Accordingly, she smiled pleasantly and invited the girl into the living room. The stranger seated herself on the davenport, and to Nancy's amazement, proceeded to look the house over most critically, darting quick little glances from one room to another. She's prying, Nancy thought. Aloud, she said, What is your name? Mary Mason. Can you furnish references? The girl made no response, but from a dirty pocketbook, brought out an envelope and handed it to Nancy. The envelope contained several references, and Nancy glanced quickly over them. To her surprise, the girl came highly recommended from her former employers, and it appeared that she had held responsible positions. Nancy had been on the verge of dismissing the girl, but in the face of such excellent references, she hesitated. She was not favorably impressed with Mary Mason, for the girl had a harsh face and a bold manner, but she knew that in all probability it would be impossible to find another girl before Saturday. She was left no choice in the matter. "You appear quite young to take complete charge of the household," Nancy began doubtfully. "Do you feel sure you could manage the work? Of course I will direct you until you learn the routine." Mary Mason tossed her head contemptuously. "I always work without direction." "Indeed." Nancy was still more unfavorably impressed, and decided to ask the girl a few personal questions. "Where is your home?" "My home?" The girl looked startled, and then said quickly, "I haven't any real home. I'm an orphan." "Oh," Nancy murmured, but for some reason which she could not understand, she felt it impossible to feel especially sympathetic. It even occurred to her that Mary Mason had deliberately told a falsehood, but she tried to force this suspicion from her mind. Probably it was only the girl's queer manner. "Your age?" she inquired. 18. Again, Nancy was surprised, for she had made up her mind that Mary Mason was at least 2 years older than that. She next asked a few questions concerning the work which the girl had done in the past, and was better pleased with her answers. It was evident that she could at least cook and keep house. Nancy decided that she would put up with her until after Judge Graham's visit. Perhaps she would adapt herself after she had been in the Drew household for a number of days. "I will try you for a week," Nancy told her. "When can you come?" "This afternoon if you want me. What salary can I expect?" "Oh, yes, I forgot to mention that. I pay very well indeed, but in return, I expect faithful service. I will start you at $15 a week with room and board, and of course you may have 1 day off a week." Nancy Drew had expected that Mary Mason would express satisfaction at this arrangement, for the pay was much higher than the average in River Heights. Instead, the girl scowled darkly. "Surely that is enough," Nancy said a trifle impatiently. "Oh, I suppose it'll have to do, but it's not as much as I should have." "I noticed in your references that you had been receiving only $12 a week." Mary Mason looked confused, as though she had been trapped. "Well, 15'll do, I guess." "Then, if you're satisfied with the wage, I will tell you something of the work. I'm sure you'll not find it particularly difficult, but as I stated, I am rather exacting about details. You see, because of my father's position, it is necessary for us to do a great deal of entertaining." "I'll have no trouble," the girl returned indifferently. "Then I guess there's nothing more I need to tell you until later. I'll have your room ready for you when you return this afternoon with your things." Mary Mason arose to depart. She sauntered across the floor, casting a last appraising glance about the room. Nancy escorted her to the door, and as she opened it, recalled that she had neglected to mention her own name. "I am Nancy Drew," she said pleasantly. Mary Mason's indifferent attitude vanished as if by magic. "Nancy Drew?" she repeated tensely. "Why, yes. You've heard of me, perhaps?" The girl ignored the question. In fact, she seemed not to have heard it. As Nancy stared at her in surprise, she saw that the color had drained from her face, leaving it white and frightened. "Who are you?" the girl demanded harshly. "You aren't the daughter of—" "Carson Drew," Nancy finished. "You've probably heard of him." "Your father is a lawyer?" "Yes. He specializes in criminal and mystery cases." The announcement had a very peculiar effect upon Mary Mason. She took a step backward, and her hand gripped the doorknob. Her eyes dilated with something that looked like fear. I can't take the position, Miss Drew," she said a trifle shakily. "You can't take it? Why not, may I ask?" I didn't know your father was a lawyer." "What difference can that make?" Nancy asked bluntly. "I'll not work in such a place. I wouldn't think of it." "My father will be very kind to you. You need have no fear on that score. I don't see why you should be afraid." "Oh, I'm not afraid," Mary returned hastily. "It's just that I might get into trouble working at a place where the man of the house is always mixed up in queer cases. You'll have to find another girl." "But it's so late, and I've had such a time. Judge Graham is coming this weekend." "I tell you I won't stay," the girl broke in, becoming more excited. "Even if I offer you $18 instead of $15 a week? That's an outrageous amount." "I won't stay here under any condition. Let me out." Nancy Drew reluctantly stepped aside, and Mary Mason rushed out the door, fairly running across the porch in her haste to reach the street. Nancy, a puzzled expression on her face, stood in the doorway and watched her until she had rounded the corner. "Can you beat that?" she exclaimed, lapsing into slang. "If she isn't the strangest girl I've ever met. And to think I've wasted nearly an hour in talking to her." Chapter 4. About the Crandall Jewels. A less enterprising and resourceful girl than Nancy Drew would have been hopelessly discouraged at the turn events had taken. In truth, after Mary Mason's strange leave-taking, Nancy was discouraged, but not hopelessly so. Deciding to transact no more business by telephone, she climbed into her roadster and set out to make the rounds of the employment agencies. The afternoon brought nothing but disappointment. She returned home tired but undaunted, and the following morning started out early, determined to make one last effort before admitting defeat. It was not until late that day that fortune favored her. After interviewing no less than 6 girls who were utterly unfitted for the place, she chanced upon Mrs. Sadie Carter, an elderly woman who suited her in every way. Mrs. Carter was neat in appearance and thoroughly experienced. Her references were of the best, and her demands not at all unreasonable. Nancy was delighted and promptly engaged her. It took less than 1 day in the Drew household for Mrs. Carter to prove her worth. "Now, don't you worry about a blessed thing, Miss Nancy," the woman said to her. "I'll tend to everything." Nancy, satisfied that the new housekeeper was dependable, was delighted to be relieved of responsibility, especially as she was eager to call upon Emily Crandall. She had not forgotten that she had been promised a glimpse of the famous Crandall jewels, and she had no intention of allowing the opportunity to slip away. Accordingly, after an early luncheon, she backed her roadster from the garage and set off for the Crandall cottage on the lake. It was with high anticipation that she walked up the path to the house. She rapped on the door, but there was no response. After a little wait, she rapped again, louder than before. Still, no one came to open the door. Somewhat mystified, Nancy walked around the house. There appeared to be no one at home. "It's only 10 minutes after 1, Nancy thought, glancing at her wristwatch. "Emily probably didn't expect me this early. She may come back later, but I don't believe I had better wait. I can see the jewels at some later time." She returned to the roadster, and after a moment's hesitation, started the motor and headed for River Heights again. She had driven less than 2 miles when she noted the approach of a sedan. "Why, I believe that's Mrs. Willoughby's sedan," she told herself. "It must be Emily." She brought the roadster to a halt and waved her hand. Instantly there was a grinding of brakes, and the sedan came to a stop alongside. Emily Crandall sprang from the car and came running over to the roadster. "Oh, Nancy, I'm so sorry. I know you must have stopped at the cottage. I intended to get back before you came." "I just wanted to congratulate you on your birthday, Emily." "Thanks, Nancy. I'm as happy as a lark today." "Then you must have received your inheritance." Emily Crandall's pretty face clouded. "The jewels haven't been turned over to me yet. I shan't get them until tonight." "How is that?" "Well, you see, they've been kept in a safety deposit box in another town. Mrs. Willoughby had to go after them today." "I should have thought that you would have gone with her. I know I couldn't have waited." "I did want to go, but Mrs. Willoughby went with a friend of hers, a Mrs. Potter. I'm not very crazy about her, and anyway, there wasn't room in her little car. I'll see the jewels tonight." "Then you'll have to keep them in the cottage all night?" "I suppose so." "But aren't you afraid, Emily?" "Yes, it does make me a trifle uneasy. But I guess they'll be safe enough. No one knows I'm inheriting them except you and Mrs. Potter." "Oh, they'll probably be safe enough for one night," Nancy returned, for she did not wish to alarm Emily. "But it seems a shame they couldn't have been left in the safety deposit vault. Then there couldn't have been any risk." "That would have been wiser, I suppose," Emily said thoughtfully. "I wish now I'd told Mrs. Willoughby to leave them in the bank vault. But I've been perfectly crazy to see them." "Can't you telephone her?" "I am afraid it's too late. She'll be on her way home by this time." "Oh, you'll probably get your jewels all right," Nancy observed. "But it does seem to me that Mrs. Willoughby is a trifle careless in removing them from the vault." "I guess that's just her way, Nancy. She always has been careless with things. Oh dear, I wish I'd gone with her." "I'm sorry I said anything, Emily. I didn't mean to disturb you." "Oh, I won't worry," Emily laughed. "I'm far too happy. Besides, we haven't had a robbery in or anywhere near River Heights for years." "I think you're a very lucky girl to be coming into such an inheritance," Nancy said easily. "I am lucky." Emily's eyes began to dance, and the troubled frown instantly melted from her forehead. "And just look at this." Proudly she displayed a glittering diamond on the third finger of her left hand. "Emily Crandall, you're engaged?" Emily nodded happily. "I'll tell you all about it if you promise me you won't repeat it to any of the girls." "Cross my heart." "I'm engaged to Dick Farman. You've met him, Nancy. Don't you remember? He works at the Granger Manufacturing Company." "Oh, yes, I remember. I wish you all kinds of happiness." "Dick and I would like to get married next fall," Emily went on. "But right now, he isn't making enough for us to live on." "If I remember correctly, Dick has excellent chances," Nancy said politely. "Oh, yes, he's certain to work into a better position in a few years, but it's so dreadfully hard to wait. He has a chance to buy out an established business for only $3,000, too. If he could only get started for himself, he'd soon make enough so we could get married." "Hasn't he any savings?" "Oh, yes, but not enough, and this deal requires cash. The worst of it is that he must raise it within the next few weeks or miss the opportunity." "What a shame." "That's what I think, and I'll tell you what I intend to do, Nancy. You won't tell?" "Of course not." "I'm going to sell a few of those jewels and set Dick up in business. I know he'll make good. And of course I intend to keep some of the jewels and maybe have them reset. But there's no use in keeping them all. They'd just lie around in a bank vault. Do you think I'm doing wrong to help Dick?" "No, I don't," Nancy returned firmly. "I think it's very generous of you. I certainly wish you all joy." "I felt certain you'd agree with me," Emily said eagerly. And now, since I've told you all my history, won't you come back with me to the cottage? I really haven't time now, Emily, but I'll drive back tomorrow if I may. Fine! Then you'll get to see the jewels after all. I'll be looking for you. With a wave of her hand, Emily Crandall returned to the sedan and drove away. For several minutes, Nancy Drew sat motionless in her roadster, staring fixedly straight before her. Emily would be broken-hearted if anything happened to those jewels, she thought. Then she shrugged her shoulders and shifted gears. What's the matter with me anyway? Always borrowing trouble. Chapter 5. At Lilac Inn. As Nancy Drew drove slowly back toward River Heights, she tried to persuade herself that her fears concerning the Crandall jewels were groundless. She did not fully succeed in doing this. In fact, at the very moment she said goodbye to Emily Crandall, startling events were taking place only a few miles away. Had Nancy Drew been at Lilac Inn, she would have seen a handsome car swing up to the door from which two elegantly dressed women alighted. Nancy would have recognized Mrs. Jane Willoughby and her friend, Mrs. Clara Potter. As the two women stepped from the car, Mrs. Willoughby cast a quick glance about and nervously clutched a handbag which she carried. Mrs. Potter kept close at her side. "Do you think it was wise to stop here for luncheon?" Mrs. Potter asked in a low tone. "We can't take any chances, carrying all that precious jewelry." "Hush!" her companion commanded sharply. "No one must know I have it." The two women walked swiftly up the path to Lilac Inn and entered the dining room. As the hour was early, the room was but half filled, and the ladies were led at once to a table by a window. As the two seated themselves, many of the diners turned to stare curiously, for it was obvious from the nervous manner in which Mrs. Willoughby clutched her handbag that she was carrying something valuable. Mrs. Willoughby, innocently unaware that she had given herself away, placed the handbag on the table and sighed in relief as she unfastened her wrap. "I'm sure no one suspects that we are carrying valuables, Clara. However, I shall feel very much relieved when I have Emily's receipt for what I am carrying. Mercy, but it's warm in here. Or perhaps it's the excitement. Don't you think we should have a window open?" "By all means, Clara." Mrs. Willoughby motioned to a waiter. "We would like this window raised," she told him. The waiter glanced curiously at the large handbag which rested upon the table, for the clasp was ornate, set rather lavishly with stones, and with a polite bow, he opened the window. He then took the order and departed. "Did you notice the way he looked at that purse?" Mrs. Willoughby whispered. "Yes, I did, but he couldn't know what was in it, I'm sure. Just the same, I almost wish we hadn't stopped here. This place is beginning to give me the creeps." "I know just how you feel, Jane. I have the same sensation myself, just as if someone were listening to our conversation." Mrs. Willoughby laughed nervously. "Ah, aren't we silly, Clara? The other diners aren't paying a particle of attention to us." "That woman over in the corner seems to be watching us, Jane. The one with those piercing black eyes. I don't like her looks." Mrs. Willoughby glanced quickly toward the woman indicated and nodded in agreement. "She does seem to be specially interested in what we're doing, doesn't she? But of course she can't know that we are carrying valuables. We haven't told a soul." "I suppose we're just nervous. Of course, she can't know that the jewels are in the handbag. After all, the bag is a beauty and well worth looking at, and it is oversized for ordinary use. Well, here comes the waiter with our luncheon. We can eat quickly and get away." As the waiter placed the steaming dishes upon the table, Mrs. Willoughby watched him closely. She decided that she did not like the way he kept looking at her handbag. Finally, he brought the salad, and before Mrs. Willoughby could stop him, he lifted the purse to make room for the plates. "Don't touch that!" she said sharply. Mrs. Willoughby had not intended that her voice should carry, but to her embarrassment, several diners glanced at her curiously. "I beg your pardon, madam," the waiter said politely, giving her a quick look. "Oh, I see," Mrs. Willoughby murmured apologetically, as she saw that the waiter had merely intended to move the purse to a more convenient place on the table. "Oh, that's all right." The waiter returned to the kitchen with his tray, and Mrs. Willoughby and her friend exchanged anxious glances. "He must have felt how heavy it was when he lifted it, Clara." "Yes, but I feel sure that the help at Lilac Inn is reliable," Mrs. Potter said comfortingly. "The management would have to be very careful, you know, in order to maintain the excellent reputation of the place." "Probably you're right, but I shall keep my eye on that handbag every minute." "Yes, it doesn't pay to be careless." Conversation lagged as the two women turned their attention to luncheon. They were both eager to get away from Lilac Inn, though neither was willing to admit her growing nervousness. At last, to their relief, the waiter appeared with dessert and coffee. Mrs. Willoughby had scarcely touched a spoon to her orange ice when a woman who was sitting on the opposite side of the room gave a little scream of fright. Instantly, every eye turned her way. Mrs. Willoughby's spoon clattered against the plate. Mrs. Potter sprang to her feet, and she too gave a cry of alarm. "Look at those two automobiles! Someone is going to be killed!" It was all over in an instant. To the horror-stricken diners, there came the sound of a terrific crash. Two automobiles had collided at the crossroads. Chairs were hastily pushed back, and everyone rushed to the doors and windows. For several minutes, everything was in confusion. In her haste to see what had happened, Mrs. Willoughby upset a glass of water. Even the waiters dropped their trays and ran to the door. "I saw it all!" Mrs. Potter cried. "I'm sure someone must have been killed. The cars came together with terrific force." "Oh, how dreadful!" Mrs. Willoughby moaned. "Why will people insist upon speeding?" "Send for a doctor and an ambulance!" Mrs. Potter cried. Several men rushed from the dining room and hurried toward the scene of the accident. One of the waiters sprang to a telephone and quickly called the nearest doctor. The room was abuzz with excited conversation. "It was their own fault," someone declared emphatically. "I saw it all from this window. Both cars were going at terrific speed." "Oh, I hope no one was killed," Mrs. Willoughby murmured anxiously. For a few minutes it seemed that everyone talked at once, relating what each had witnessed. The commotion died down as the manager of the tea-room, an elderly, pleasant-faced woman, came up the path. "It's all right," she informed the diners. "Fortunately, no one was seriously injured. Both cars, though, were completely wrecked." "What a relief," Mrs. Willoughby sighed, as she turned away from the window. Nearly all of the diners went back to their tables, and Mrs. Willoughby and her companion among them. As Mrs. Potter sank down into her chair, her eyes swept the table in amazement. "Oh, Jane," she cried in alarm, "your bag! You picked it up, didn't you?" Mrs. Willoughby rushed to the table, her face expressing genuine horror. "No, I thought you did." "I didn't touch the bag. When I heard that terrific crash, I forgot all about it." "It must be here somewhere. Look under the table." Mrs. Potter jerked up the tablecloth, but there was no sign of the handbag on the floor. "It isn't here, Jane." With a low moan, Mrs. Willoughby sank into a chair. "Oh, what shall I do?" she wailed. "Someone has stolen it. Emily's inheritance." "I can't believe it," cried Mrs. Potter frantically. "The purse must be here." "But perhaps you dropped it in your chair," she suggested hopefully. No, I've looked there, and it isn't on the floor. Oh, what shall I do? Are you sure it didn't drop behind the table? Here, let me pull it out. Mrs. Potter grasped the edge of the table as she spoke and pulled it away from the window. The missing handbag was not revealed. This is your host, Kathryn Lopez Luker. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stories Come to Life. Be sure to join us next time when we continue to listen to Nancy Drew and the Mystery at Lilac Inn. You can find a link to our podcast on the Marshall Public Library webpage, www.marshallpl.org. I'll talk to you again soon.